Welcome back to our show. First off, we would like to thank all of you for the love and the support that you give us, helping our channel reach 60,000 registered viewers. We promise to keep improving and finding the best retro news for you. On with our show now, and in our new retro games this week, we review Knightmare for the ZX Spectrum, a fun and varied action-adventure game. We continue with the incredible resurrected Terra Cresta, the legendary arcade and 8-bit hit game, finally for the Amiga computers. Our new retro games reviews conclude with an amazing platform game for the Commodore 64, Superstar Chefs. In our hardware review this week, we have a closer look at probably the most unique piece of hardware we ever got our hands on, the Moviecart for the Atari 2600. And yes, it is what it sounds like. Our DOS Vault reveals an incredible game, homage to the classic Asteroids, You Be at Orbit, and we remember one of the first successful platform action games for the PC systems, Jim Power: The Lost Dimension in 3D. In our retro adventures, we play the creepy, scary and funny at the same time Blackout, a very well-made point-and-click adventure game. And in our retrospect, we review the quite unique space noir thriller with a distinct sense of humor, Innocent Until Caught. Finally, our history lesson looks back into the story of the probably most successful console add-on of the old times. We inspect the history of the Famicom Disk System. So, let's get this show started. Welcome to this week's new retro games reviews, and we begin with Knightmare by Sausageware Games. This is a multi-gameplay, should we say, game for the ZX Spectrum, both the 48K and the 128K, with the only difference being that in the 128K you get a full soundtrack. Now, this game is based on an 80s TV show where you are wearing a helmet that renders you completely blind, and you have to move through a gauntlet of tests and survive. Now, each stage is a completely different experience, ranging from stages that resemble a Pac-Man version, others that have riddles that you must solve, others based on puzzles, and many different ones. The graphics of the game are very large sprites that move quite good. The animation is, well, pretty basic, but our guess is that this was a sacrifice that was made in order to have these big sprites that are so detailed in their drawing. There is full color, the game is not in black and white, and it avoids mostly the annoying color clash of the ZX Spectrum. The music in the 128K version is indeed very good and atmospheric. The gameplay is varied. Some of the stages are really fun and enjoyable to play, and you will want to go through them again and again. Others sometimes are a little bit tedious or repetitive, but that is depending on your tastes. All in all, the variety in the gameplay can only be considered a good thing. Now, the controls of the game are pretty good. There is no problem with collision detection, but sometimes your character, because of his big size, will seem that he can pass through an area or a narrow path, but he will get stuck and you will have to try again and again. You have a life bar that diminishes every minute, and you have to move fast if you want to survive the dungeons. Now, on to the rankings of the game, and the graphics receive an 8.9. The controls an 8.5. The music and sound effects a 9. And the gameplay an 8.6. For a total of 8.7. Knightmare is a great game that offers a variety of gameplay styles, that most of them really hit the mark. We suggest you give it a try for yourself, as we believe there's something for everyone to enjoy in the game. It's a solid effort, and it's definitely one of the best additions in the ZX Spectrum Modern Collection. Our next review is for a game with an interesting story. This is a port for the Amiga by Spreadpoint and Swiss Cracking Association of the famous arcade and 8-bit success Terra Cresta. Now, this version for the Amiga was supposed to be lost for a long time, as the game never officially came out on the Amiga. The copies of this game were found recently and restored, although the music soundtrack has not been completed yet. But there is a promise from the developer that this will also happen soon. As it stands, the game has full sound effects, but unfortunately no music. The graphics of the game are excellent and very close to the original arcade. The controls, the collision detection, everything is spot on as you remember it. And truly, this must be the best version of Terra Cresta yet, a game that we enjoyed back in the day on our 8-bit systems. This is a solid effort to restore a classic game, and as such, we're gonna be a little bit more, let's say, favorable in our rankings. The graphics receive a 9.1. The controls a 9.2. The sound effects, as for specific reasons there is no soundtrack at the time being, receive a 9. And the gameplay a 9 as well, for a solid and fair 9.1. This is a rare port, and once it is completed, we're pretty sure that it's gonna stand up there as one of the best shoot-'em-up ports ever to grace the Amiga platform. Be sure to check out this gem and look for updates when the entire game is complete. Our last new retro game review for this week is coming from one of the developers that lately has been one of our favorites. This is Superstar Chefs by Donut80 for the Commodore 64 computer. This is a platform game that's gonna remind you a lot of Bubble Bobble, but without the bubbles. You need to collect all fruits. Sometimes you get a special bonus that will allow you to eliminate some of the enemies that will provide you with recipes that, from what we managed to see, once gathered enough, will grant you an extra life. Now, the game is classic platforming in its best form. There are springs to catapult you higher. Your character has the ability to do a double jump. The graphics and the animation of the character is very, very good, and the characters belong to the category we would call cute graphics. Now, the game is very, very colorful, and it's not confined to the classic mundane palette of Commodore 64. The music also is excellent, with a very good soundtrack to accompany you on your adventures. The collision detection is especially fair, and what really impresses us is the fact that you have total and absolute control in the air, mid-air we would say, during the jumps of your little chef, something that enhances and amplifies the gameplay in a wonderful way. The game itself is pretty addictive, and all stages are made up with a lot of fantasy. The game is best enjoyed with 2 players, just as the Bubble we mentioned before. It's kind of a cooperative and competition at the same time, and it really makes the game even better to play. Now, on to the rankings of the game, and the graphics receive a 9.2. The controls a 9.3. The music and sound effects a 9.1. And the gameplay a 9.1 as well, for a 9.2 total score, and the title of the Game of the Week. Superstar Chefs is one of the best platform offerings so far in 2026, and if you miss out playing it, you're only missing out for yourself. We definitely recommend you give it a go, with a buddy if you have, as you will find a new favorite game for your Commodore 64 library. Welcome to this week's hardware review. Now, I review some kind of weird peripherals. I've reviewed some wonderful peripherals, but it's the first time that I'm going to review something so wonderfully weird. This is Moviecart for the Atari VCS. Yes, you heard right. This is a cartridge that will enable your Atari VCS, either the classic one, the Woody, or the Darth Vader model, to play back movies. Of course, you don't expect, I hope, 4K or high-definition videos. You do know the hardware capabilities of the Atari, but still, it's a pretty weird and curious hardware, and, well, I'm dying to test it. It comes, when you buy it, with a public domain version of The Night of the Living Dead, and I've also inserted my Apple II review, just to see the whole conversion method and the end results. So let's go try it out, see how it works, and come back to sum it up. Let's go. Right, here we go. We're gonna turn on our Atari. There we go, Moviecart. Now this is the included version of The Night of the Living Dead. It's a public domain version. We can press the game select once, that we'll move on to the next file. This is the Apple review. Now there are a few controls here: brightness, time, at which spot in the movie you are, and volume. You drag the controller to the right and it raises the volume. The same goes for the brightness control. There. Now, you can pause the movie by pushing the fire button and unpause. Back to this movie, and that's fast forward. I know, of course, the resolution is, well, terrible. You can switch to black and white, which is better for this movie since it's a black and white movie. The frames per second it's amazing. Now the cartridge comes with an included SD card. You didn't see it before because I've used an old cartridge case to put it in. It does not come with a printed case, but you can always use an old cartridge or an aftermarket one. There's not pretty much anything else to show you. The controls are very, very easy, black and white and color mode from the console controls. You can always skip back or ahead by using the game reset button. So, after this very, very interesting close-up of the functions of the Moviecart, let's go and sum up our findings. Now, this is honestly one of the weirdest peripherals I've ever reviewed. Of course, you don't have to rely on this one to replace your home video, home cinema. But this is a very, very interesting hardware from the aspect, of course, of what can be done using modern methods and after 40 plus years of knowledge of a hardware system. It's amazing that it even works. It's something to show off to your other retro buddies if they don't have it. It's easy to convert movies for it. I don't know what else to say. This, if you want something quite unique in your collection and something that will put a smile in everyone's face when you show it off, this is a cartridge for you. I really enjoyed this week's hardware review. It was something quite unique, and we'll see you again next week. Let's open up our DOS Vault once again, and we begin with the game You Be at Orbit by THP. This is a shoot-'em-up game for the MS-DOS system that is based mostly at the classic asteroid game. You control a spaceship and you try to destroy the enemies that take the form of various spheres and, let's say, geometric shapes. You have a very powerful laser that does get overcharged, and as a result, the shooting frequency lowers. So you will have to be a bit strategic of how close you're going to get to the target and how many shots you're going to fire before you have to retreat until your laser recharges fully. Now the game gives you a 360 control of your spaceship by using the cursor keys. The movement is fluid and it follows basic physics rules, just as the original Asteroids, although here you have a bit more of control of your spaceship. The graphics of the game seem simple at first, but they are so very well designed and animated that truly it fits the game. It does have a small influence, I would say, from Geometry Wars that also, in its own turn, had influences from the Asteroid game. We would say that UB at Orbit is a mix of the two. It stands somewhere in between. The sound effects of the game are very good and complements the gameplay in a perfect way. The gameplay itself is pretty addictive. The enemies come at waves, and each time you complete one wave, you have a small moment to pause before the massacre begins again. Now, the rankings of the game are as follow. The graphics receive a 9.1. The controls a 9.2. The music and sound effects an 8.5. And the gameplay a 9. For a total of 8.9. This is a wonderful shoot-'em-up game, very addictive, and a true tribute to the classic Asteroid games with a lot of enhancements. It's a wonderful addition to the MS-DOS library, and if you like shoot-'em-ups, you better give it a try. You won't be disappointed. It's true that back in the MS-DOS days, the platform action shooters of the likes of Super Wonder Boy and Monsterland, etc., were not exactly a strong point for the MS-DOS platform. But after the arrival of the VGA and Super VGA cards along with the Sound Blasters, the situation started to change. This is Jim Power, The Lost Dimension in 3D, one of the better games of this genre for the MS-DOS by Loriciel. Now this game also had ports for Super NES and Sega Mega Drive, if I recall correctly. It is a game with wonderful graphics and very good animation. It even includes parallax scrolling, something pretty rare for the MS-DOS back in those days. The premise of the game is simple and classic. Attack enemies, upgrade your weapons, collect bonuses, and face end-of-level game bosses before advancing even further. The game even transforms into a classic shoot-'em-up at certain points, adding variety to the gameplay. The music and sound effects are of very high standards, considering the fact that this is an early production and one of the very first games using fully the sound cards. The gameplay is addictive and well balanced, although we would suggest if you're not, let's say, a master of the kind, you play on the easy mode, as the game can get a bit brutal later on. The controls of the game are simple, using the cursors and the spacebar, and the game even supports joystick, something not so common back in the day. Now, the rankings of the game are: graphics 9.1, controls 9, music and sound effects 9.2, Gameplay, 9 as well, for a total of 9.1. Jim Power, The Lost Dimension in 3D, was an early example of what the PC was really capable of when the VGA and the sound cards arrived. It's an excellent platform game, and it definitely is a game that worth revisit if you are a fan of the genre. Welcome to our retro adventures, and we begin our reviews with Blackout, an adventure game, a classic point and click by Fresh. Now, in this game you play as a young witch that finds herself in a scary old house with no recollection of her identity or what she's doing there. The deeper you search the house, the more terrifying it becomes. This is a very well designed point-and-click graphic adventure, and it utilizes the classic formula. The user interface has been simplified and mostly has to do with you clicking at the right spots or using items from your inventory. The graphics of the game are a bit cartoonish, but they still retain a creepy and terrifying atmosphere. They are very, very well animated, and the color palette really fits the atmosphere. The music and sound effects of the game are wonderful. Especially the soundtrack is of excellent quality. The controls, like we said, are nothing too complicated. In fact, I think that they have simplified the classic formula to the biggest extent. The puzzles of the game are always on the logical side, and all you have to do is be a little observant of the environment and a little careful, and you will always find the solution to any puzzle the game throws at you. The characters, the atmosphere, everything has a wonderful mystery theme and borderline horror sometimes. The story of the game is interesting and will keep you entertained and enthralled until you find out what is the actual secret of this dark and haunted mansion. The main character is also a very fun and interesting person, and her comments on each and every situation really spice up things with a sense of dark humor. On to the rankings of the game, and the graphics receive a 9.1. The puzzles of the game, a 9. The music and sound effects receive a 9.4. And gameplay and controls, a 9. For a total of 9.1. Blackout is a very well made, very interesting and very atmospheric horror point-and-click adventure game. You should definitely give it a try, as beneath it hides a true gem of the genre. Our retrospect today brings a game that was borderline classic. This is Innocent Until Caught, a graphic adventure created by Psygnosis for the MS-DOS. The game also came out on the Amiga computers. You are well, the closest thing we can call you is a space scum, a thief and a scoundrel. And you get arrested by the Interstellar Revenue Decimation Service, and you get 28 days to pay your taxes. On your attempt to escape this situation, you will get involved in a pretty complicated and interesting story. The game has a special sense of humor. It does have the classic point-and-click philosophy, but it uses a series of icons, bringing it a bit closer to the Sierra games. Now, it's obvious that the creators of the game try to make a character closely resembling Han Solo, we would say, but on a more devious style. The game is funny, but sometimes the jokes are a bit stretched. It's all down to your preference in the sense of humor. A lot of the reviewers back in the day loved the game, whilst others found it a bit cheesy. The game did have a lot of bugs when it came out, but as a testament to its success was the fact that almost everyone played the game, even though it was so buggy. The graphics are very well made, as is the animation. There is close-up of the characters when you're having a conversation that also fit the atmosphere of the game. The music is excellent and the sound effects are functional. The controls, as we said, are pretty good, but there are some places and some functions that will give you trouble. For instance, sometimes your character stands in front of an item, and the reason for that is because he went there when you clicked the icon to inspect it. Now, if you try to pick up the object, the character will get tickled instead of picking it up. It's funny initially, but it gets a bit tedious later on. There is a little bit of slowdown sometimes, but this must be part of the bugs that we mentioned earlier. The puzzles of the game are mostly logical. There are a couple of puzzles that borderline the irrational, but it's nothing to break the gameplay in any way. Now, on to the rankings of the game, and the graphics receive an 8.7. The puzzles of the game receive an 8. The music and sound effects a 9. And the controls and gameplay an 8.1. For a total of 8.4. Innocent Until Caught is a very special adventure game. It will make you laugh and enjoy this almost noir comedy space adventure, but there will be times that will frustrate you and annoy you. It's still worth playing, and if you find it enjoyable, there was even a sequel named Guilty that continued and ended the story of the protagonist Jack T. Ladd. Our opinion is that you give it a go if you haven't played it back in the day, and decide for yourself if it is a wonderful space comedy noir adventure, or if it's just another adventure game of those days. At this point, it would be pointless to talk to you, our fans, about the size of the success that the Nintendo Famicom had in its homeland of Japan. It wasn't just the most successful console at the time, but it was essentially the system that started for an entire country the video game culture that is today so deeply embedded into their society. It would also be pointless to mention the phenomenon known as add-on failures. Many companies, whilst trying to cling on a successful console, try to extend their lifespan by creating various add-ons that would enhance the system's original capabilities and lure in more customers. The history of video games is filled with such examples. Sega 32X, Sega CD, Nintendo 64 DD, Atari Jaguar CD, just to name a few. But there was one add-on back in those days that wasn't just a success, but it became an enabling technological achievement that changed the way we play games and the size and philosophy of our favorite digital worlds. This is the story of the Famicom Disk System. After the launch of the Famicom by Nintendo in Japan, it would seem that every household was playing with Mario and Co. at some extent. By 1985, Nintendo had almost 85% of market control, and the cash was pouring in. But demand far exceeded supply for the console and the games. The problems were on many levels though. Many software developers have complied with Nintendo's very strict rule frame, but at the same time, they have started to demand a new medium of storage that at least wouldn't catapult the cost so high as the cartridges did. By that time, Nintendo was already in talks with Hudson Soft that proposed an add-on that would use their B-card format. B-cards was a short-lived medium storage at the size of a credit card that was used by no more than 11 games for the MSX computers. It was, though, the predecessor to the Hue cards used a few years later on the NEC PC Engine system. Nintendo would pass on that deal though, as the high-tech components for that time demanded to manufacture the B-cards would still keep costs high, and the royalties to be paid were considered expensive. In the end, Nintendo turned to Mitsumi, the famous hardware and computer manufacturer, and their proprietary disk format called the Quick Disk. This was an alternative to Sony's floppy disk format with low production cost and uncomplicated components. The legendary hardware designer Masayuki Uemura, father of the Famicom itself, was appointed to the job of creating the proper add-on that would handle the Quick Disk format. On that note, we should mention that the Quick Disk format was adapted to the add-on's appearance and style and was renamed the Famicom Disk. The add-on was ready after many delays in early 1986 and was launched on February 21st at the price of 15,000 yen as the Nintendo Famicom Disk System. For the marketing promotion, a mascot was created named Discon, and a massive campaign was launched through the press and the TV all over Japan. The FDS was an instant success. Within 3 months, the disk system sold 300,000 units, and by the end of 1986, 2 million. To further support the system, Nintendo introduced to the market the FDS Disk Writer Kiosk. This was a custom stand found in many retailers that would allow the gamer to buy an empty disk, choose a game from the catalog available at the kiosk, and write it to the disk, right there and then. He would then take home the disk, play the game, and when he finished it, he could use the same disk to write a new one to the kiosk again. The Famicom Disk System was not just another add-on for Famicom. It introduced the world to the save game feature for the first time in a home console. The gamer did not have to rely on a password system anymore that would take him all the way to the beginning of the stage. Games could be saved with all the progress made and be continued at will. The increased amount of space for the FDS, to be more specific 112 kilobytes per disc in a double-sided format, allowed for bigger and more complex video game worlds to be created. The system also added 32 kilobytes of cache for the program data and a wavetable synthesizer chipset, enhancing the Famicom's sound capabilities. Many classic titles were launched on the Famicom Disk System for the first time. Super Mario Bros. 2, The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, to name but a few. The kiosk system was also very important for the market. Because piracy in the Japanese computers was getting out of hand back in the early 80s, many software developers placed a lot of pressure on the government for the matter. In the end, the Japanese government, to control illegal software copies, banned game rental as a practice from the country with a law in 1984. So, since then, the only way to obtain new software was simply to buy it. The kiosk system introduced a new digital software distribution system that boosted sales and rectified the losses after the rental system's ban. But the FDS was not without its problems. The discs themselves had many technical problems. To reduce manufacturing costs, Nintendo removed the protective shutter from the discs, exposing the magnetic area to dust and fingerprints, eventually destroying the stored data. The disk system's rubber drive belt also was prone to snapping frequently, whilst the console would give sometimes weird and unjustified error messages. The loading times of the FDS also were far longer than the cartridges, almost instant loading that the gamers had gotten used to at that point. The agreement that the developers had to sign to make software for the FDS was also in the same, if not worse level, of strict and harsh rules as the cartridges one. In fact, with the FDS, Nintendo would automatically own half the copyright rights for every game that would be produced, effectively making Nintendo a silent partner in every developer's new game production. Many companies for this reason, such as Namco, refused to produce even one title for the FDS. Then there was the increased storage matter. When the FDS came out, Nintendo's demands from the developers seemed justified, or at least worth it up to a point, granted that the FDS provided them with a system that had far more storage space than the existing cartridges. That situation, though, eventually changed. In late 1986, Capcom launched the famous Ghosts and Goblins platform game in a 128 kilobyte cartridge, exceeding the storage available in the disk system format. Soon, costs for the cartridge manufacturing started to fall rapidly, as more companies seemed to enter the video game console industry, making the cartridge cheaper storage than Famicom discs. The kiosks stand also, even though they were seen as an invigorating move from the software developer's side, for the retailers it was a bulky, unattractive machine that took up a lot of store space. Nintendo tried to face some of these problems by licensing the technology to Sharp, that produced a combined system, the Twin Famicom. It was a console that combined the Famicom console and the disk system into one device, for 32,000 yen and seemed to be of higher build quality. But the sales of the system were not enough to take over the already installed user base and eliminate the problems. Much of the problems remained though, resulting in Nintendo considering the launch of the peripheral outside Japan a high risk, and resulting in the cancellation of the US launch by 1988, and no further plans laid for anywhere else in the world besides Japan. In its homeland though, the Famicom Disk System remained popular. By the end of its lifetime, the system had sold approximately 4.4 million units, whilst the disc writer kiosks remained in operation across the country up to 2003, 17 years after the system was introduced. Nintendo offered technical support even until 2007, where the Famicom Disk System was finally put to rest. The FDS or Family Disk System was more than just an add-on. It brought us the first games with a proper save game system, the first big worlds based on complex gameplay, and introduced some of the most iconic video games ever to come out from Nintendo, such as the Metroid and Zelda franchises. It may have spent its years in its homeland of Japan for the entirety of the system's life, but its influence was felt the world over, changing the video game industry for the better.